Talk Shoes.
Recorded live.
Good evening. This is the May 9, 2014 edition of the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, which is sponsored by the Black Science Fiction Society. I'm here this evening, Penelope Flynn, standing in for William Hayashi, primarily because William Hayashi is our guest this evening. Yay! All right. So those of you all who have been members of ESFS for a while, or who've been listening to the show for a while, know that William has been, I think, interviewed how many times? Once earlier. Was it twice? Once or twice? I know, yeah, a couple times. I know once it was February, I think, 2013. I remember that one. And I think one thereafter, but I can't remember when that one was. But the reality is that since that time, so I think, since we've doubled from 2,000 to 4,000 members, that means that there are just as many people now who are members who didn't know who you were back then that now are going to have to learn who it is that you are. So I guess we can start.
From your mouth to somebody's ear.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. I guess we can start, asking, to tell us a little bit about who it is that you are. I mean, bearing in mind that we already know, from the blurb at the beginning that you are a writer, a screenwriter, you are a novelist. You have background doing DJing and have also been the host of the show. So I guess, let's just start back with your childhood. Tell the people a little bit about yourself, your childhood.
I grew up a young Japanese Negro on the south side of Chicago. Actually, I came from a pretty good neighborhood. I mean, Hyde Park is where the University of Chicago is. It's the neighborhood adjacent to where President Obama's home is. He's in Kenwood. And actually his home is just a handful of blocks away from where I went to high school. I was a public school child, and, I make no bones about telling people that I have the finest sixth grade education one can get from the Chicago public school system. And actually during my childhood, it was a pretty good childhood. I have little complaints. I could probably nitpick a whole lot of things, but decent schools. It was a different time. I grew up, my elementary school years and my high school years, were in the 60s and the 70s. So it wasn't, it was pretty turbulent, but it was a good neighborhood to be in. And one of the things that I really enjoyed, especially looking back, is the fact that my parents were very, very politically active and politically aware. And that has stood me well for a long, long time because, politics is the art of negotiation. It's the art of getting along. It's the art of manipulating masses. I mean, there's so many things that goes into politics. And being very politically aware, I think, was a big help in a whole lot of things that I ended up doing as I was growing up. So that was a good thing. After that, I went to school in Green Bay and in Madison, Wisconsin. One of the reasons that I was drawn up there was I didn't want to go to Vietnam. So going to school was a much, much better alternative. Also, my parents met, black woman, Japanese man. They met at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is a very liberal school, a lot of international students. It really is an island of sanity in a state that's very, very conservative. And in large part, you don't find people who have a lot of depth. They're very simplistic. I mean, you have people there complaining because, the Native Americans get to hunt all year round, plus they get casinos. And so, you have these guys with hunting habits upset that there's restrictions put on their hunting, but the native peoples who have been screwed for like however many years Europeans have been in this country. You know, they get to do things like that. So that was kind of strange growing up there. Going to Green Bay was really bad because I was a Bears fan, and they're rabid Green Bay Packer people. And the other thing is, I hate winter. We just had the worst winter in Chicago in my memory. And as much as I hated Chicago, I still, today, you know, I sit here and I go, well, why did you go to Green Bay to go to school? And the answer is kind of, I mean, it makes sense to me. At the time, it was probably one of the only environmental schools in the United States of America. That was 1973.
What does that mean?
I'm sorry?
What does that mean,
well,
environmental?
They had a whole curriculum based around environmental sciences, sociology, psychology, you know, about, you know, the stewardship of the country, of the world. And you know, I had some pretty cool projects. One project, I went and got a you know, the trains on a railroad car, you know, those big metal iron things. I got one of those and made a contraption and hooked it to two bicycles and a generator, and we figured out how much, you know, electrical power you could get for something like that. And I was thinking of putting a whole bunch of those in a bunch of prisons, and you know, prisoners could ride their way to good health and rehabilitation. But they didn't bite on that. But going to an environmental school was, I mean, it was, even today, if you say that today, people don't know what it is. And I think that in the intervening years, the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay has migrated to becoming more like a business college for kids who are too scared to go to Madison. And, you know, if any of my friends ever listen to this, I'll probably hear it from them if they're upset by that characterization. But, I mean, that's what it seems like today. So I spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. It wasn't too far from Chicago, about 3-4 hours from Chicago, depending upon how you drove.
And when you were there, what was your concentration when you were there?
I started out in the sciences, and then I gravitated over to psychology and sociology. And actually, as a sophomore, I was co-teaching with another professor. I was co-teaching a class called Black and White Americans, How They View Themselves and Each Other, and got a good deal of graduate work out of that. So, you know, I ended up in the, I guess they call them the soft sciences, you know, psychology, sociology degrees, and didn't use any of them. You know, nothing I've done has been the result of any kind of degree I got in school, except for, excuse me, the business degree that I got before I graduated high school in computer programming and data processing. You know, I've spent all of those years almost exclusively doing, you know, in the IT field, and I guess it was 81 or 82, 81. I started my own consultancy and have been self-employed since. So that's a long time, and that's a lifetime in terms of being in the IT field, because, you know, I started out in 1970 with very, very big, you know, mainframe computers and rooms that were too cold. You had to wear, you know, insulated lab coats and gloves with your fingers cut out, to to where we have cell phones now that have more power, that have more capability in these cell phones than was in you know, that whole floor full of computers. So it's been quite an odyssey to watch what's happened in terms of the IT field.
Okay. Now, you talk about the IT field and your background in sociology, psychology, but did you ever take any writing?
No. Well, I don't want, about the only thing I wrote an essay when I was in, I think I was a junior in high school, and I wrote an essay, and it was about environmental concerns, which actually got published. But in terms of any kind of creative writing, no, I didn't do any of that. I came a little bit closer as a freshman or a sophomore in college. I actually took a science fiction course. But really, it was all reading. There was really no writing in it, but it was all reading. So no, as far as creative writing, nothing. Technical writing, yes. I did a ton of technical writing through the 80s and into the 90s. But I didn't do anything creative. I never even thought about it. At one time I monkeyed with writing a book, and that lasted probably about a month because I had a short attention span. But I knew the book would sell just on the title alone. I just couldn't write a book at that time. And the title was, "It's great when you find one that fits." I mean, you see that title on a shelf, you're going to want to know what the hell's in that book. But nothing till 2001. So in all of that time, I didn't even come near. There was no whiff of creativity as a writer.
So what was it that made you decide one day, I'm going to write?
Okay. I mean, anybody who's read, it's the same story. Anybody who's read, I think, either the foreword or the beginning of Discovery, which is my first book, this was a really snowy, crappy February afternoon. And I was sitting in an office. It was a kind of a temporary office for me. I was the board chair for a social service organization called Cabrini Green Youth and Family Services. And Cabrini Green is the famous neighborhood in Chicago where supposedly good times took place, in those projects. And so the reason why I was there was, at that time, the agency was coming up for reaccreditation. And at that time, you had to fill out about 6 feet of 3-ring binders worth of crap. Tell how all of the policies and procedures of your agency, what your plans were, this, that, and the other thing. And because I had the best writing skills in terms of just technical writing, I was there fairly regularly to edit and clean up, other people's writing. And on this particularly snowy day, and I remember what day it was February 6th, 2001, and we had snowfall here in Chicago. And it was the kind of snow where when it hits the ground, it immediately turns into gray slush. It's just disgusting. And I actually said to myself, not out loud because they put you away for that, but I said to myself, no matter how many stories you have in your head, because at that time I had read, probably thousands of books by that time. And I thought, well, I might be able to write. And I thought to myself, no matter how many stories you have in your head, they don't exist. They just don't exist until you write them down. And being the kind of nerdy guy that I was, I said, okay, well then, how are you going to write a book? And I had no idea how to write a book. So I pulled out the laptop, and I had a technical drawing package called Visio that allows you to do organizational charts. That's what the tool is for. And so I used Visio to map out what I thought a good plot for a novel would be. Because as I was sitting there, I came up with the perfect words to end the novel with. But then I didn't know how to get the story there, so I had to figure out how to write a story. And I mean, that's how it was. I mean, I just decided that, I guess part of it was being bored, sitting in there waiting for people to turn stuff in so that I could go through and edit and clean it up and wonder how the hell did they get, a master's degree in social service and can't write worth a darn. And then, that's when I started typing. And I started typing that February afternoon in between getting stuff to edit, and I kept going and going and going, went all through the summer, and actually finished in the fall. I finished November something in the fall. And I know it was a Friday only because, I had a tennis league, and I would play every Friday, and I remember that I was just looking at, typing something up. So I was typing, and then all of a sudden I typed these last words that I had thought of 9 months before. And it kind of freaked me out because I had written a book. And, whether it was a good book, bad book, that wasn't even the consideration. But the fact that I actually sat down and stuck to it, it surprised me. It surprised me enough that when I stood up, I was amazed at myself. And I stood up and I was kind of lightheaded. I was like shocky because, man, you just wrote a book. And really, that was the first time I ever wrote anything that was creative. That was the whole. I mean, obviously there were trials and tribulations, but that was the whole process. I think the biggest tribulation was when my friends started ducking my phone calls because I wanted to read them something. But other than that, that's the etymology of how Discovery got written.
So who was the first person you told that you had written a book?
Oh, man. I don't think let's see, at the time, I had gotten divorced. And I also think that had a lot to do with writing the book, too, because I had a lot of free time on my hands, my kids, and my ex, they lived in Wisconsin. So I had a lot of time on my hands. And I don't think I told anybody at tennis that night because I might not have wanted to jinx it or come home and find that my computer had caught on fire or, So it was a couple days before I told one of my good friends from college, and she lives in the same building that I do. And she also is one of my It's and It's' editors. So I think she was the first person I told, and she was like surprised. She knew I was writing a book, but she didn't think I was going to finish it either. So it was a friend from college who I told that I had done a book. And then after that, I honestly don't remember anymore. But it was just odd. It was odd because because it was something that was unexpected, and it really was. It was very unexpected. And I think that the other part that kind of freaked me out about the process was as I was finishing up Discovery, I realized that I couldn't stop the story there. That I would have to write other books, and that's when I figured out that it was going to be a trilogy.
So when you decided at that moment, okay, I'm going to write this trilogy. But actually, let's back up before we talk about the trilogy. When you sat down and wrote the book, the first book, were you sure that it was going to be science fiction? I mean, when you sat down, the thing that was said, could it have been anything other than science fiction?
Yeah, I did, and one of the reasons why is I've been a science fiction nut for a long time. My dad was, and he was professorial type. He ran, he taught at Rush Medical College, and he ran the biochemistry department, and he also ran the toxicology department. So he was kind of a science gearhead, and he had subscriptions to Amazing Tales, I believe it was, or Amazing Stories, and Analog, Science Fiction, Science Fact magazine. And so at the age of I don't know, it wasn't 7, but about the age of 8, I discovered those, and I started reading science fiction that early. And I think that's why I also, that was why I took the science fiction class in college. But yeah, I knew it was going to be science fiction because of, and I won't give it away for those who haven't read it, but because of the way the story was going to turn out, and most people know, the gist of, or at least the plot. But yeah, I knew it was going to be science fiction, but I wasn't, I'll tell you, when I started, I had no idea that I was going to put in so much technology, the amount of technology that I put in there. And a lot of it that I've used in my everyday life, from the 80s on, lab work, things like that. Some of it I did do some pretty deep research. I was very lucky. NASA helped a lot. The head NASA librarian helped a lot in researching part of the book, and I didn't know that that's what they did, but she, I thought of a way to do something, and I called down there, and I said, where can I find information? She said, well, what is it? I'll just ask the engineers. I mean, how cool is that? I mean, that was just cool. So, yeah, it was going to be science fiction all along.
Okay, and then what gave you, I mean, I know you said you started out with the last word and then work backwards. So what is it that made you create the types of characters? I mean, and I don't know how far you want to go into discussing Discovery or Conception or the newest book, the third book in the trilogy, Confrontation, which I know you just finished, and you're now in the reading editing phase of. But how much? I don't want to give anything away because I've read the first two. I'm in the process of being one of the readers for Confrontation. And I don't want to give anything away, but
no, I understand. Yeah, and I'll be circumspect because I know. I mean, there's people who just don't want to know. They don't want to know until they read it.
Yeah,
but
I'm that way. I'm that way.
Yeah.
I want people to ruin it for me, but I don't want to ruin it for anyone else. But
right.
just give us like the a thumbnail sketch. Those who are listening, who have not heard, don't know that much about the book. Give them like the overall arc of the trilogy, and then also just a little bit about Discovery, a little bit about nothing about Conception, nothing about Confrontation, just Discovery. Because then once you get into that, then it just leads you into other things. You can't really talk about Conception and Confrontation until you've read Discovery and you know who it is that we're talking about and what we're talking about. So just give us a little bit of Discovery.
Well, when I started writing Discovery, I had some big ambitions, and they were born of ignorance, born of not knowing how to write a book, okay, because I had never done it before, and so I go ahead and I started the story, and I put everything but the kitchen sink in there because there were so many things that were interesting to me. One thing that I wanted to do was that was very important was I wanted to start the story here in Chicago. So Discovery opens up right in my neighborhood. I mean, it's right. It opens up at the University of Chicago, and I spent enough time up there. Going to the library, hanging out. As a matter of fact, I got my best ass whipping at the University of Chicago protesting the Vietnam War. I had no idea that they could hit you like that and bruises wouldn't show, but you couldn't move the next day. I mean, we have some of the best cops for beating somebody's butt, or at least did here in Chicago. But I wanted to start it in Chicago, and I wanted the story. Here's what my intent was. I wanted a big story, and I wanted a big story that had contemporary cultural themes. I wanted it to be, for lack of a better term, a black-oriented story. But I didn't want to write a story about so many other stories, like a Mosley detective story, or I didn't want to write about urban culture. I didn't want to write about pimps, hoes, drugs, drinking, broken families, or anything like that. Because first of all, I didn't grow up with a lot of those people. That's the other thing. I had a middle-class upbringing. And on my block, I think there were either 38, 39, or 40 townhouses in a big square, and then we had a big yard in the middle. But in that block, we had black, white, Asian, Jewish, English. We had some people from England. We literally had all kinds of people there. And the high school, let me digress for a minute. The high school I went to was called Kenwood Academy now, but it was Kenwood High School. And my incoming freshman class was the first class going into this newly built school. And our high school during the late 60s was the most studied high school across the nation because we had, it was completely multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religion, multi-class. And we had no fights. We had no riots. We had no nothing. As a matter of fact, they created a television show about our school, and it was called Room 222. That was about our school. And some of the teachers on Room 222 were direct analogs from people who taught, teachers at my school. So some of what pushed me to write was anger. And part of that anger was the nonsense that we had to listen to when the Cosby Show started, and you had a black lawyer married to a black doctor with teenage children, black teenage children, who had essentially what America considered white problems. Because in America's eyes, there is no such thing as a black middle class. There's no such thing as a nuclear family, a nuclear black family in the American cultural lexicon. And that pisses me off. I mean, it pissed me off to no ends, because those are the families I grew up with, and those are the kids I grew up with, and those are the professionals who ended up, who are now my peers. I'm on a big project right now with people from my past, from my summer camp days, and this is like, I just wrote a 3-page prospectus, and I got us $13.2 million for the project. So these black folks that I grew up with, and I'm biracial, I'm half black, half Japanese. People like me, I grew up with all these kinds of people, and they don't exist. You either have Oprah or a rapper or an athlete or whatever, or you have, let's see, the new word, the new N word is thug. That's the new, or thugs, and there was nothing in between. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to write a book about people I knew, the people I grew up with, the personalities, the kinds of people that I grew up with, and I wasn't going to do your typical, stereotypical black-themed book, and that was the impetus for it. And so a lot of it was anger. And based upon the fact that when I was done with the manuscript, it was 750 pages, and I had an editor pull about 250 pages out of it, apparently I had some issues about being divorced as well. So she said, no, you don't need this in here. No, you don't need this in here. You definitely don't need this in here. I think this is you could get sued for this. So I think, and to be honest, yeah, okay, I wrote it out of a little bit of anger, and I'm an angry guy, and I know this about myself. It probably doesn't come through, but yeah, there are a lot of things that I'm really upset about. Like my dad, his whole family, Japanese half of our family is from the Bay Area in San Francisco, Oakland, Alameda, San Mateo. They lost everything in World War II because they locked them up in a concentration camp in Utah. Hell, the only people that they dropped, that anybody has ever used an atomic weapon on, were some of my relatives over in Japan. So I guess I think the writing was a little bit cathartic.
Yeah, good.
But I also, always in the back of my mind was I wanted to craft the biggest damn story about our current culture that had ever been written. So at first I was really prickly when the story was done. And people said, "Oh, it's science fiction." I went, "No, mother." I said, "No, it's not." I said, "It's speculative fiction." And then people don't get that. They think that's highfalutin. But what it is it's kind of an alternative history of what we've gone through in the past decade, maybe. We don't have a black president in my book because that didn't happen. We don't have the war with Iraq. Oh man. Okay, let me tell you something that really pissed me off when I wrote the book. I'm writing the book, and I've got a sequence in there about something that goes on in Iraq, and then what's his, bullet head, George W. He goes and he starts a war with Iraq, and I honest to God, I leaned back. I still had cable at that time, and I'm watching this attack, and I'm going, I cursed a lot, like, oh my God, now I got to change the whole thing. And then, when I calmed down, I realized, oh wait, William, you're writing fiction, so you really don't have to be that upset. But I was pretty upset again because I didn't know what I was doing. So that's how it all came about.
I remember when you first logged on to the BSFS, we were talking about the book. We were talking about it, people writing small little vignettes related to what a person or family member would react to when they found out about the issues that were the basis of this entire story. And I know that for the sixth grade, I sent you an email and I asked, well, what happened, with regard to 9/11? And you said there was no 9/11 alternative, setting. So none of these things, no Barack Obama, no 9/11. So I was like, okay, so we got to think differently. This is a different United States, different world. Geographically, the United States, but really a different world with regard to where our heads are when we start reading the story.
Yeah, that was deliberate because I thought that if I wrote too close to current history, that trying to do the mental or the literary gymnastics in order to make the story authentic, but yet reflect a little closer what goes on today, I thought that was going to be too hard, and that it wouldn't come off as well. So I did it the other way. This is another world, but you know what? Everything that happens in there, everything that happens in all three books, and I just figured it out. There's about 750,000 words in the entire trilogy. And all of those words are as true about the nation we live in as the reality we're all living today. I can't imagine, and nobody has ever come to me and said, this makes no sense. Well, there is one review up on Amazon that says that it sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit. But it was from a white guy who just couldn't imagine that black folks would be so disenchanted with living in America that they would go to the moon. And which is something I'm going to put up on the board every time I go and lecture about this book. Because, there's obviously differences between how people perceive America, just totally dependent upon color.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the reality that people don't really consider. I mean, because when I read this, I have to admit I read and I thought, wow, there's a colony on the moon and nobody told me. I wasn't invited. What kind of crap is this? Because that's how it feels, and when you're reading it, it feels that real. It's very, it's not. I don't know what word I want to use for it. It's not. On the one hand, it's technical. There's a lot of science in the book, but it is important to the book that the science is there, because I believe that's what gives it its gravity. That's what makes it gives it its gravitas, and makes it seem so much more than real. And I guess that's the difference between, I know you said speculative fiction, certainly, but I mean, it's about as close to hard science fiction as you can get, and still be speculative fiction, because it is based in hard science.
Yeah, and that was very deliberate on my part. One thing that drove me, kind of a paranoia about writing was, and more so for the second book, which is Conception, than the first book. But the first book was, I'm thinking, well, if any of those, what's his name? These guys who write executive, or the techno thriller guys. If any of the techno thriller readers read that and they go, oh man, that couldn't happen because those missiles don't exist, or whatever. The fear of having to deal with that kind of nonsense kept me on the straight and narrow as far as doing my due diligence and doing my research, because I did want. I mean, everything in there except the one way that these black folks got to the moon is real science. And a lot of it is science that I've actually had vindicated over the past decade. They're now using the same method that I proposed in 2001 to try to detect gravity waves coming from the sun. And that was something that I thought of in terms of, okay, so how would you detect gravity waves? I went and did that. They just found out, or just published week before last or last week, about what it takes to lengthen someone's life. What is the actual process of aging in someone's life, and how is that controlled? So that you could either stave off, dementia or things like that, or if you could actually live longer. And so, that science that I used, in 2001 is science that now they're catching up to, saying, and I'm not saying that I'm brilliant, but I just want to say that that's how hard I researched, how much I researched. So that was, I think that stands me in good stead, to your notion of, hard science fiction, because, I do have the science in the science fiction.
Yeah. And one of the things I always, I kind of like when I'm doing the reading is that when I know, is it fantasy or is it science fiction? Because if it's fantasy and it's magic, it's fine. And I know that I'm reading that and I enjoy it. And, if it's science fiction, then it needs to be science, not, based in some sort of, razzle-dazzle, hocus-pocus. It's actually magic. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with magic. I like magic. But when I'm reading science fiction, I like for it to be based in science, not magic. And because that's, it's just kind of like I like my horror. When I read something that's horror, I like horror that touches on things that are mundane, because it makes it even more personal. It makes it more real if it's touching on the mundane, not just kind of like out in the, ether all by itself, or with no, nothing that, it relates to that we can, compare or process, but we know, especially like you discovered, we're talking about things that we know, places that we know, and now these things are happening. So, how did this thing happen? Things that, especially those of us who are children of the late 50s, early 60s, and even going into the 70s, where the space program played such a huge role in our lives. And, as you were saying, your father, great science fiction fan, you, great science fiction fan as a result. But this thing, I think, that growing up in that atmosphere, do you feel that growing up in that era, of the space race, do you think that has pushed you in this direction? I guess,
well,
is it an homage to the space race?
It definitely is. When I was growing up, we had I even remember the newspapers, and one of my favorite cartoonists is Herbert Bloch. And when Soviet Union launched the Sputnik satellite up there, Walter Cronkite reported on it, as news, but you could kind of still feel a national kind of depression because we weren't there first as Americans. And I had at that time, I grew up with a lot of national pride in our science. We really kick butt in science in so many ways. Besides developing nuclear weapons. And we've lost that now. Now, ever since Richard Nixon declared war on the intelligentsia during the Vietnam War, this dumbing down of America has been a really seriously backward slide. And then, and excuse me for those of you who may be non-secular, strongly non-secular, but, that crap about, not doing stem cell, excuse me, and fetal stem cell research because of religious reasons in this country, that put us so far behind the eight ball. South Korea is further along than we are in stem cell research. We used to do some really badass science in this country, and we don't anymore. And for somebody who grew up during, Mercury, Apollo, Skylab, during all of those Gemini, and all of those times, and actually seeing those transmissions live from out in space, you look at how we are today, kids don't know jack about science. And it's just, And these kids are supposed to take care of me when I'm old? Oh, man. They got a 2.5-minute attention span and ain't got the sense of a houseplant. I'm sorry. I don't feel very very good about leaving these guys to do stuff. So when I write from my perspective. Some people said, "Oh, you got to dumb it down. You got to, you can't have so much science. Oh, it's too hard. It's, And I said, well, skip over the hard stuff that you don't know, but read the story." Because I didn't know how to dumb it down any.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand that because the story it just kind of unfolds.
Yeah.
And the science is so much a part of it because we start out the story with scientists. So how can we get around the science?
Well, and the other thing is, look at how many truly innovative black scientists we've had in the last 400 years. And, not just George Washington Carver, but what's his name, who did the first open heart surgery. And, science, medicine, again, these are the kind of black folks that I grew up with. These were my contemporaries. They went to my school. They hung out, Asians, too, had a bunch of Japanese folks. I grew up in a multicultural environment that most people will never experience again. And that was a driving impetus for writing the story that I wrote, because I wanted to write about people I knew, people that I had never seen in science fiction. For damn sure didn't see them in the movies. How many black folks in Star Wars? How many? Okay, we had one. We had one in Alien. Oh, we have one here. We have a bunch of them in Star Trek on TV. Trouble is, they're wearing red shirts and their asses get killed off after the first commercial. So, and you've got all of these science fiction movies and stories that have no demonstratively black people. There were more Indians and Pakistanis in a lot of those pulp movies than there were black folks. There were more Africans than they had black folks. And I'm thinking, what the heck? Obviously, white folks ain't planning for us to be around. And that was something in the back of my head when I was writing too. So I had a lot of issues, and I wrote them all out. And hopefully, in the process, apparently people think the story is good, and I'm very gratified for that, because I did pour a lot into it, and I wanted to write a good story first, and then have the other issues be incidental to the story.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now with Confrontation, and I know you're saying that you finished the trilogy, but means are already aware that this is not where it ends. So, what was it that made you think, even as you were thinking, I'm going to do a trilogy, at what point did you realize that you were going to go further?
I was about halfway through Discovery, and I knew how it was going to end. And basically that's what I was doing. I was writing to get to this ending, this what I thought was a brilliant ending. And then I realized that, well, if I end it there, I've only told part of the story. And I think it was, when was it? It was probably about 2/3 of the way through Discovery when I jotted down the synopses of what I thought the next 2 volumes should be. And I like the simplicity of one-word titles, because essentially the title is telling you what you're going to get out of the book. In the first book, it was Discovery. Well, they discovered whatever they discovered. In the second book, it was Conception. And, in Conception, I'm telling the story of how things happened, to get us to Discovery. So it's almost like a prequel, but the first 2 books end at the same scene. On the same scene, at the same time. And then the third book, it's inevitable. It's inevitable, and it's called Confrontation. And if anybody is going to be honest, let's say a community of 2,000 black folks have science and technology that white folks don't have. Well, you know, you're gonna have some trouble. You know, there's gonna be things that are gonna happen. So, and part of it is, you know, all of this is culture driven. I don't believe that black culture or white culture in America are survival oriented. I just don't. I don't see it. I don't see how either culture is going to survive, you know, through this century. And then you've got, you know, the changing demographics where, you know, sometime along the 2040s, 2050s, you know, Latinos will be the majority population in this country. And I just don't see how our country can survive the way it is. So what I did was I wrote a speculative fiction story about a way out for, you know, members of the black community and how that follows forward. So there you go.
But there is still not just the first trilogy, but you've also conceived the second.
Yeah, you know a lot about this, see, because we've had discussions. But yeah, and I'll tell you, this is actually, that fact alone made this last volume a little tough to write. I have planned 7 total books in the Dark Side universe. I have 2 trilogies, and I have a final volume that winds up the whole saga. So, but the thing that I wanted to do, and I wanted to do well, was I wanted to conclude Confrontation, the book that I just started now, which is one of the reasons why I'm agonizing over the ending. I don't want it to be cheesy. I don't want anybody to read it and go, "Oh man, you know, he just left that out so that we'll buy his next books." And sometimes I forget. So I was very careful. I wanted to have a trilogy that stood on its own, and each volume of the trilogy, I wanted each volume of the trilogy to be a standalone story where you didn't require the reader to have read the previous book or books in order to appreciate the, you know, the second one or the third one. So yeah, there's 7 books. I'll tell you, I think this last one might be out around September, and then I got to take some time off. You know, I want to get away from writing for a little while, or at least that, because I actually have a feature movie that I want to do. And so that's something that I don't want to keep pushing off, because there's so many people here in Chicago who are interested in doing this movie that I don't want that interest to die just because I'm involved with doing nothing but writing. Plus, I don't make enough for my writing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you to start talking about the movie, screenwriting portion of the program. And as I said, we talked a lot about your writing, and when you started, what, you know, precipitated it. But when in all this writing did the screenwriting start to manifest? The design.
Well, screenwriting was an accident. I guess it's a funny story to me, only in retrospect. But what had happened was, like I said, I wrote Discovery in 2001, and it actually didn't get published till 2009. I ended up having to self-publish because at the time it was being put out there, it was a 750-page novel from a guy nobody had ever heard from. So that's kind of a heavy lift for any publishing company. And it's also tough to get. It's been tough for me to find the right kind of agent. But what had happened was I helped out a production company, a young production company here in Chicago, to, you know, from the business side. I didn't know anything about, in this movie production, I didn't know anything about movies. I didn't know jack about that. But they asked me to help them out on the business side, you know. And so I came in to do that and learned a lot about the industry. And the cool part was I met a lot of interesting people and a lot of good people who are good film people. So in 2009, I was at one of these, film networking meetings, and a couple guys came to the meeting who I knew, from working with this production company, and they went belly up because they didn't listen to anything I said. And so they came there and they said, "Hey, there's this contest, and we're going to enter it, and we would like to know if you can help us write." And I said, "Well, sure, I think I can help anybody write." And I said, "But I've never done a script before in my life." They said, No, we got a script writer. We just need someone to make sure that we can write it, make it ironic or whatever. And so I said, "Sure, fine, no problem. I'll come and help." And it was for the 48-hour film project, and that's an international competition that goes from city to city to city to city, worldwide. So, like, when it's here in Chicago on that weekend, first of all, if you're out filming in the street, the police don't, throw you in the can for not having a permit because nobody knows where they're going to film. Essentially what happens is at just before 7 p.m. on Friday night, you pull from a hat, you pull a genre, and so you've got all these teams, and they pull these different genres, and then the contest coordinators, they give you a line of dialogue, a person's name, a male and female variant, a job description that they have, and a line of dialogue. So every single movie, regardless of what your genre is, has to contain those elements. And then, you get that, and then at 7 p.m., you blast out of there because at 7 p.m. on Sunday, you have to turn in a fully produced film, credits and everything, 3 to 7 minute movie, or 4 to 7, 3 to, I don't know, something like that. So, okay, I go and we pull our genre, and I'm driving back and I'm thinking about what it is. It's historical fiction, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, oh, this would be perfect. This could be Adam and Eve 2.0, plus with the fact that if we hide the nudity and have real nudity, of course we're going to have a leg up because everybody likes to see naked people. And so we get back, and then our team leader said, "No, we can't do that because we've got these actors and this crew, and I want to use everybody who's, and the Adam and Eve thing would have only been like 3 actors, Adam, Eve, and God, and God was going to show up later. And we had 2 people for God. It was going to be a cool reveal. So he said, "No, we can't do that." And then as we're talking, it comes to our attention that the guy who said he was a writer, a screenwriter, was actually an actor. And when I found that out, I swear to God, I swear, I had a nervous breakdown. I had a nervous breakdown right there. Because, look, there's this whole room full of people, actors, crew people, equipment and stuff, and if you have no script, you've got nothing. And now all of a sudden I have to write a movie script. I don't know the format. I'm going on Google trying to figure out what the format is. I sweated completely through a couple of changes of shirts and stuff because I was so nervous. And I managed to pull it together because I was incoherent, I swear to you, for like 45 minutes. They couldn't say anything to me that and get any sense out of me. So I started writing. I figured out what I was going to do, and I wrote from about 8:30 until about 5 in the morning. And so I had the script, and I went, and figured out the format and everything, and people were telling me, "Oh, no, you got to indent this. Oh, no, you got to do this. No, you don't put that in there because, the director decides, what the blocking is." I don't know what the heck blocking is. I don't know, And so I did that, and I went home, thinking, oh, well, we're supposed to be back at 9. And I got home about, 5:30 or so. And I actually I had a place where we were going to shoot, so I had the keys for the location, so I was scared to sleep. So I just sat up on my couch, with my eyes open until it was time to go. Okay, flash forward 2 weeks, and we went a bunch, they screen all the movies. And we got a bunch of audience appreciation awards, best this, best that. And then a week after that, we go to the Chicago Awards ceremony. And so, we had been nominated for 3 of the city awards, 3 of the big awards for the city. So we were pretty cool. We were feeling pretty good about that. And so one of them was for best screenplay. And I thought, oh wow, that's great that we got that. And again, my ignorance was showing through, because they went through all the awards, and then they got to best screenplay, and the nominees are blah 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 blah. Structured Productions, Fallout, and Fallout is actually on YouTube if anybody ever wants to look at it. Or actually, I might even have it on my page on BSFS.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said, and the winner is Structured Productions for Fallout. And I'm clapping because we won something, and Eugene, big brother, is sitting behind me, smacked me in the back of the head with something fairly heavy. And, as the stars were clearing, he says, "Get your ass up there. That's you." So for my very first script that I ever wrote, I actually won an international award. And that was probably one of the coolest nights of my life. Now, after they're done handing out the awards, some people come up to me and say, "Hey, can you come outside for a minute?" So we walk across the street to a Dunkin' Donuts, and they said, "We have to submit something for NBC. We heard about this short story of yours. Could we convert that? Would you give us a license to do that, and maybe even work on, be on site?" So in like 30 days, my first two scripts I ever wrote got made. And since then, the next two scripts that I wrote, they got made. So that's a pretty good record, and I want to trade on that and hopefully use that to get the $2.5 million worth of funding that I want to do for this other movie, which is it's a comedic bank heist movie. So that's how the whole screenwriting thing. I mean, it was kind of accidental, but I enjoy it because it's a whole different kind of writing.
Mm-hmm. And if you compare the two, writing the novels and then the screenwriting, which one do you prefer? Or I'm just unfair.
Oh, I like the novels more, probably because I've done them more, and I think they have a little bit more longevity. And also in a novel, you can put a lot more into a story. In a movie, you're looking at about 100 pages worth of a script, and it can't go too long unless you've got a good reputation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like people say, well, why don't you convert your books to screenplays? And I'm not that good. I'm not good enough to do that. To be able to take a novel and condense it down to a reasonably good movie, I think is something. I mean, that's a talent that I really respect, and I don't have that talent. I know I don't have that talent. I wouldn't know the first thing. First you have to decide what's going to be, what should be in the movie, because you couldn't turn discovery or conception into a movie. If you were going to stay very faithful to the book, you would have to have probably like maybe a mini series, because they are pretty dense. I mean, Discovery is 500 pages. Conception is 600 pages. Conception has a lot more dialogue, so there's more pages. But they're both somewhere around 220,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. Some people say I have an ego as big as All Outdoors, and they may be right. But I will admit right up front that I don't have the chops to go and do that kind of a screenplay.
But do you see your work being something that could be, it's a mini-series, a television show, or do you see it eventually only as a big screen 2-hour production per book?
Too many people have told me that as they read my novels, they actually see the action going on in front of their faces. Okay, so if they, and it's because apparently I write with a highly visual style. So I think they would make great movies, because the first one would be kind of like I don't know. Someone wrote that my first novel was a cross between something that Michael Crichton would write and Robert Ludlum would write. which is, I mean, that's horribly, horribly, horribly flattering. Not horribly, horribly, but I mean that's awfully flattering.
Right.
So then if there's that much action and that many twists and turns in it, then I'm pretty confident that somebody who's a better screenwriter than I am can probably convert it to a good movie. And if you take, you know, the Dark Side trilogy as is, I think it would make a great trilogy of movies. So if somebody does do that, I think it'd be pretty cool to see it on the big screen. Certainly, it's nothing that's ever been done before. I mean, the plot is something that you have never seen before. But then I'm also realistic because in the second book and about half of the third book, you're talking about an all-black cast. So how do you get that funded? How do you get that greenlit in a Hollywood where George Lucas has to pay his own money out to do Red Tails? You know, not that it was the greatest writing in the world, but nobody would even give him the time of day. And he's not somebody who puts out crap, you know, as far as making money. I don't know what Red Tails did at the box office, but you know, unless all of a sudden a lot of readers start making some noise about the trilogy, I don't know what.
All right. We just kind of blinked out. You hear me? All right. Is it just me, or is everything gone completely silent? William? What the hell just happened?
I have to apologize for that. I didn't know that my phone was sitting over to the side there.
Oh, yeah, now, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear a thing, and I don't know if it's your phone or my phone, but just.
Oh no, it was me. It was me. I got dropped. I really should pay this bill more often. I don't know where I dropped there, but the final word on if I want to see this as a movie, do I see it as a movie or a miniseries? I guess it depends on who wants to pay for it, and who gets interested in it.
That makes sense. That is a lot of sense. So do you see yourself, actually pursuing getting something done as a film or a miniseries or a television show? Or is that something you're just going to wait to see it come to you?
Well, did you hear the part about how I would get 50,000 copies sold right away in the New York Times?
No,
or did I drop out?
No, I missed that part.
I can get 50,000 copies sold in 90 days if I have $20,000. And the way I do that is I take out a full-page ad in the New York Times book section and advertise the Dark Side Trilogy as the 3 most significant movies of the 21st century, and then have a list of characters and then have a list of actor names who I would want to play that character. And so I would have 2 kinds of people who would buy the book. I would have those who were curious about what the frou-frou would be about, and then I would have those who would buy it because they were mad, like, who does this guy think he is? And I don't care, whether you buy it happy or sad, or happy or mad. That would be how I could immediately propel the book.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, it's up to the vagaries of the marketplace. I haven't done as much as I could to market the book, mostly because I've been writing, trying to pay my bills, things like that. And as much as I talk to other creatives about, how do you go about managing your day between, being creative and doing the business of doing business, I haven't had exactly the luxury of the time to do the business, or to do the business of being in business as an author. Mm-hmm. So there's more I could do. I know there's more I can do. I just haven't had a chance to do it. I will tell you, though, I have gotten a lot of support from the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com membership in terms of there are people who have read it. There are people who have encouraged me, and the encouragement I get from people who are obviously in that business, in that genre, who are in that world. I mean, that's huge. I mean, it really is huge, because I'm probably just as insecure as anybody else about whether or not what I do is worthy. Okay? And to find out that from people who read the genre regularly or are fans of science fiction, and they say that it is a good story to them, that's hugely gratifying. I mean, when Discovery went on Amazon, when was that? That was December of 2009. I honestly didn't know that I had written a good story until probably maybe June or July the following year, until I started seeing some of the reviews come in. Because, yes, my friends read it, but my friends have an emotional buy-in. I mean, anybody who is a friend to anybody has an emotional buy-in with a relationship. And I mean, even if a friend of mine wrote a really, really bad book, I wouldn't tell them right out that it was bad in a bad way, but I also wouldn't want them to publish something that I thought that they might get ridicule or criticism for. So I wasn't really secure in the fact that I had written a good story until I saw strangers say, "Hey, this is a good story."
Mm-hmm.
And then to have, and after that, I discovered, the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website, and then even lucked into being able to interview other creatives, because normally I'm sitting on the other side of the microphone, and to find out how people do things and how they judge, what they place value on. These are things that I don't think a lot of people understand how useful they are and how valuable they are. So, to those of you who have read what I've written and have helped me along in critiquing and things like that, I am eternally grateful, because nobody wants to put out a bad product. Nobody wants to put out a bad story. And in some ways, nobody wants to listen to a critique that that ends up criticizing what they've done, because that's a tough thing. Because essentially, what it is, most creatives take that as a repudiation of their own worth, and it's really not. But it's really hard to divorce yourself from someone's criticism as being something that's being offered to improve or to help understand, how another perspective on one's work. I listen to everybody, and everybody who I find out has bought either Discovery or Conception, I actually send them a present in the mail to thank them for supporting me. I mean, it's not an expensive thing, but it is something that I do want to do. So that's how I do that.
Well, I think speaking about the process of listening to other people, and taking their listening to their critiques and listening to their criticisms or their suggestions. Do you find that listening to other people's suggestions is hard?
Wait, I didn't hear the last part. Do I?
You find listening to other people's suggestions is hard? Do you find it difficult? I mean, for me, I look at it that you're creating this thing, and everything you said, yes, it's true. It's not you. It's not a repudiation of your innermost self. It is a book. It is a separate entity. But it's like somebody listened to you and said, hey, your baby's ugly. How can you not be offended? And somebody just called my baby ugly. I'm ready to fight. So how do you deal with that? When somebody, basically calls your baby ugly, how do you deal with it?
Well, fortunately, I'm lucky. I've only had one person that I've ever encountered, and that was the guy who wrote that bad review for Discovery, who has said something, the equivalent of your baby is ugly. I'll tell you something that it's a double-edged sword, because it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing on the big scale, but it's a bad thing on the small scale. I was at a law office, and I was talking to the receptionist, and she was probably mid-20s, been to college, and the guy was there to see. Oh yeah, William wrote a book, and he had actually purchased Discovery and Conception, and I was there to sign them. And she said, "Oh, really? What are they about?" And I said, and this is exactly what I said. I said, they tell the story of what happens in America when the country finds that black folks have been secretly living on the backside of the moon since before Neil Armstrong got there. And she kind of looked at me, and her mouth dropped open, and she said to me these words: "This isn't a true story, is it?" Now, I got two reactions to that. I got one that's not charitable, okay? There's one. But the other one is like, well, if I say it that way and that's their reaction, there's kind of a coolness factor to that. Is this true?
Yeah.
But I mean, come on, it's like if they had found black folks on the moon, everybody, I swear to you right now, there wouldn't be anything else that the entire world would be talking about if black folks had been living on the moon and we didn't know about it.
Well, or you would continue not knowing about it because they would never want you to know. But the thing is, I think it's interesting. The whole concept of doing this, of writing this, it falls into that category that's called fantasy. That as a people, we have been denied that. I mean, everyone else is allowed to imagine themselves as king of the world, the smartest, fastest, best, most superheroic, if you want to call it that. That they are allowed to think of themselves as this thing. But we have never been allowed to think of ourselves in that context. This is an ultimate fantasy. I think it's, fantastic. I think it's brilliant. It's the thing that, when my, kids read something, or my nieces and my nephews, reading, and this is what they think of themselves, that this is the possibility that there is for me. I could do this. Another guy was just like me, or a woman was just like me, they did it. So I guess I could do it too, and without reservation, without hesitation. And because everyone else, as well, like you're just talking about, Star Wars, everyone around, the heroes, the villains, everyone is not you. You live in a world that is, your existence is discounted if it's even acknowledged at all. But in this, it is all about us. It's everything between discovery and conception, everything is about us, either us or how other people are looking at us. So, and that's why I guess it's just, and not in the classical negative, keeping it real way. These people are up here, they're doing their thing and completely oblivious, as to what anyone else thinks or does, because they're so into their own heads. They're so into doing what it is that they're doing because they have a plan. And that's the thing that I think is, the most interesting thing. You're reading this, it's the first in discovery we'll learn. It's like you're the third party watching a chess match. And conception, which in my opinion, humble opinion, is a masterpiece. That, it's far, as much as I love discovery, conception has, far exceeded even what was done in discovery. So, I've got to tell you, the confrontation from my review, it's going to have to bring it, because I just don't being, better than conception. I really, we'll see. But, that thing, if you all have not read Conception, and I know Williams, he threatened my life for not telling people to read Discovery first. And so Williams says read Discovery first. But I've got to tell you, if you've got to get one, if you've got to pick up a book that will change the way you think about yourself and the way you think about every other black person you see walking past you on the sidewalk, you need to read Conception.
Well, thank you for saying so. And I do, and I understand why you say it. and actually, a few people have started reading with Conception, and then go pick up Discovery second. So I haven't gotten to speak to too many people. I try to speak to as many people who read my work as possible, because I really think that what they tell me is something I should listen to. And
I think that's true.
I'm sorry?
Very true. I think that's very true. I also think it was very true that when that lady, that real smart one, was telling you that they were like being one of your readers, and then that they wanted to talk to the other people who were reading, and you told that really smart lady that no, she couldn't do that, and then she got really mad. Remember that?
Oh, you are never going to let me forget that, are you?
Never.
Well, here, let me tell you. That's okay. That's a useful. I'm glad you kind of brought that up. I choose my readers based upon their demographics and where they were raised. And I'll give you an example. One of my readers for Conception was an 80-year-old white man who he was actually an intelligence officer during the war, one of the wars, I don't know, World War II, Korean War. Grew up in the Depression, and to be very honest with you guys, this is what astounds me about this man. This is a man who grew up in the Depression, white guy, and he is completely without any racist bias at all. Now imagine my surprise when I found that guy. And we've been friends for a long time. And as he was reading Conception, because Conception tells a story of how black folks got to the moon. okay, and what their motivation was and what their thinking is. And the thinking is based upon the culture of America in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And then, then it gets a little bit more to the present. But he would call me on a regular basis, and he would truly be puzzled at the characters' reasoning for why they wanted to do what they wanted to do, how they spoke the way they spoke, and it was such a graphic illustration to me that, and it was instructive to me, because not every white person is steeped in racism. The news is making a big deal about Michael Jordan saying that he never liked any white people. And obviously, entitled white folks are very resentful. Like, well, how dare you? Why would you ever think of that? And then I'm thinking, well, if we go back in history, let's go back in history 1,000 years. 1,000 years. Let's take the history of 1,000 years. If you're an FBI profiler, and I'm very close, I'm damn close, and you look at the last 1,000 years of world history, who has committed the most heinous acts against other people? And these are Europeans. Okay? And then you think of who has been the most genocidal in the last 1,000 years. I don't want to go earlier because then it messes up my whole thing. But, I mean, let's look at America. In America, who has caused the most strife? Cultural, religious, what have you. And again, the complexion is the same. So when you have black people who live this on a daily basis, who go, I am not going out at night in this neighborhood. I am not going to be on Michigan Avenue with the rest of my other black friends because we're going to be thought of as a gang and get picked up for no damn reason whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Or like I was when I had an 8-inch afro when I was a disc jockey. Oh, let's just drive my dad's brand new Volvo on Lakeshore Drive with 4 of my friends in the car, and they all, and we got pulled over in 4 blocks on Lakeshore Drive, and the guy claimed we went from 0 to 60 in heavy traffic in 4 blocks. Huh. No, we were DWB. So, to find this gentleman and have his perspective was very important for me to have him read Conception and be one of the readers for Conception, because his perspective was, it wasn't like anybody who's listening to this show or who will probably ever listen to this show. Mm-hmm. So that's how I choose my readers. I choose my readers demographically because I want to hear from them what their issues are with the story, what they don't understand, what they do understand, what's significant, what's not significant.
And I think that's wonderful, and I think that's a great idea, except that instead of you answering that question, you should have let the rest of us answer the question.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll think about having a round robin for all the readers who read Confrontation.
Yeah,
I'll set up a conference call, and y'all can talk to each other, and I won't even listen in.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, okay. All right. So don't hurt me on this anymore.
I won't. If you do it, then all will be forgiven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else you got for me?
Okay, well, right now it's about 9:24. So we're almost at the last half hour mark. And we didn't stop at the hour mark, but again, we'll do our station identification for the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Series 2.0. This is our May 9th, 2014 edition. We are here this evening with the host, William Hayashi, now in the hot seat. And I guess in a few minutes, for those of you who have any questions for William regarding his very long and varied career, we can take those now. You can leave them in the chat room, or you can call in with them. Or, and in the interim, I have my own, questions that I'm going to put out there. But if you do have a question, you're welcome to, call in or, place it in the chat room.
Yeah, there are actually two people who are called in, and I'm going to unmute their phones since Jarvis gave me the controls. And if anybody does call in and they want to ask a question, I'd be more than happy to answer it. If not, we'll just chat until then.
But somebody said that this is an earlier message, but they're asking about going to C2E2. So did you manage to get there this year?
No, I did not. I had to work. I volunteered at a school. I helped design and build this school on the west side of Chicago, and I'm one of their tech volunteers, and we've been going through a number of upgrades because we lost one of the other volunteers, and that Friday night, of course, I had to do the show. Saturday, I was at the school, putting in new switches and changing out some cables and doing a bunch of stuff. Actually, one of the phones even went dead, so I was kind of working on that. So, no, I didn't make it to C2E2, and I really wanted to go, but I couldn't fit it in. And then let me tell you a funny story. Just this, I like to get out and do stuff, but like this last weekend, I did something really stupid. I went and played tennis on Friday for the first time in a long time. I played tennis since 1970, and I played high school, college. I played professionally. But I hadn't played for about the last year because I was writing Confrontation. And I'm due to get a new hip. One of these days I'm going to stop by the new hip store and get a new hip for my for one of my legs. And so I played for a couple of hours on Friday. And I played well because I don't want to let anybody dominate me. And I played very, very well, but I paid for it. Although, Friday night I pretty much slept like a baby. And that by a baby I mean I was waking up every 2 hours crying. But and so then on Sunday I had Saturday to kind of rehab. On Sunday I went hiking in the Indiana dunes and walked between 5 or 6 miles. And there's something that's really disturbing to me. And that is, apparently, I had no idea that this was going to happen. 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, I wasn't this old, and it wasn't this hard. And going to C2E2 would be something that I would really like to do, but I'm going to do it after I get that new hip.
Okay.
And writing, when I'm focused on writing, I have my routine of making sure that every night at about 10 o'clock, I get in front of the computer and either write or edit. And I spend about 3 or 4 hours every night, 7 days a week, when I'm composing a novel because I want to get it done. And now I'm down to doing, about a 250,000 word novel in 5 to 6 months. And I'm happy with that because I have a system that really works well. So when I am in full-on writing mode, I don't get out as much. I don't know how other people do it, but that seems to be the best way for me to do it.
Right, and I guess another issue is being a reader and having read Discovery and Conception, now Confrontation. Do you find that Confrontation is more like Discovery or more like Conception?
I think of all three books, Discovery is the most different from the other two. Discovery's style is someone else said it was a cross between Michael Crichton and Robert Ludlum. I mean, so it's kind of a mystery with twists and turns in it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Confrontation and Conception are they're more like chronicles of what's going on. I will tell you this, that I think that there are some surprises in Confrontation that people are not expecting. But conception is a chronicle. Conception is introducing you to, essentially what conception is doing is introducing you to people like the people I grew up with. I mean, there's no direct analog. So, like if you look at one of the characters, so and so, he's not like so and so in my life. There's no direct analogs like that. But the type and kind of people in my universe are very, very much like the people I grew up with. So that makes it both easier and harder to write. It makes it easier because I kind of have maybe a little bit of a personality construct to follow behind or to copy. But it makes it harder because I don't want to be that unoriginal that somebody reads the book and goes, damn, he just took that from my life, or oh, this is so and so. Oh, I know him. This is that guy who he did X with or whatever. So
right.
And then the other hard part for me, and I think I said this the last time. I think I did. The other hard part about writing for me is picking character names. Did I mention that?
I don't think
that's really hard for me to get character names because, and I don't know why. I was going to say because of, but I don't know why. But it's just hard. So I can sit there for an hour trying to figure out what to name this person. And it could even be a throwaway person who only appears in one chapter to do one thing. Oh, Johnny flipped the switch and then his head exploded. And you never hear about Johnny again. But, it takes me an hour to figure out his name. So that's one of the difficulties I have in writing. The stories, I'll be honest with you, the hardest book to write of the three was Conception. And Conception it took a dozen years for Conception to form up in my subconscious because apparently these stories pre-write themselves, and then when I get to the point of writing, what I'm doing is I'm kind of writing out what's already been thought in my subconscious. And the plot, to do the plot in Conception was very difficult for me because it covers 40 years worth of time. And the last thing I wanted to do was do something as cheesy as go, and then 10 years later and continue with the story because that, I want to have some pride in my work. I don't want it to be that messed up, So of the three, Discovery is the most different of all of the three. Conception was the hardest to write, and Confrontation, even though I finished the manuscript, I'm still kind of looking at what I want to do with the ending because the ending has to be worthy. I mean, it's, to me, the ending is the most important part of a book because I think that's the thing that people have the deepest impression about. When you go to a movie, the last thing you think about is the ending. I mean, I've been to movies where I said, oh, man, I don't like, what was that movie, Inception, where he spun the little top?
Yes.
And then just as it starts to wiggle, they cut away to the credits.
Yes.
I said a bad word, and people around me heard that bad word. Excuse me for saying so, but I called bullshit on that. And people said, what? And I said, that's just, so I want to make sure my endings are realistic, they're laudable, and they're worthy of the story because I really think that that's the most important part of a book. I understand the story.
I'm sorry? With that said, did you write the ending to Confrontation before you started the rest of the story?
No. Okay, that's a good question because Confrontation was the only book that I did not have the ending. I knew kind of what the action was going to be. But that's a good catch. No, I did not know what the ending was going to be for this last book. And it may change. It may change. But not a lot. I mean, we're talking about just the last paragraph. Because the last words in a book, I think, are the most important, or at least they are to me. But no, it's got to be good. I mean, I'm not going to end it with like "Call Me Ishmael" or anything like that, but it does have to be good. So stay tuned.
Okay, I know you're going to take off some time. Once you're done with Confrontation, you're going to spend some time getting the film done. Do you have any other projects beyond your film after you're done with Confrontation?
Yeah. I wrote an executive summary for a business that I'm getting into with, like I said, a friend from my earlier days. And this business is basically what it is we're going to be building a computer and 3D assembly plant on the south side of Chicago in the Inglewood neighborhood. And we're going to staff it with people that we train from the neighborhood, and we're going to have a continuing educational outreach program that teaches teens and young adults computer maintenance, computer repair, a computer assembly, and one of the things that I've decided to add is I want to teach these kids how to program for mobile devices. So this is really important to me because I want to get these kids tech ready. So we've got a spot in Inglewood. It's an old theater. It's like for those who know Chicago, it's over by 62nd and Western. And we're going to renovate this place. We're going to gut it. We'll probably keep one theater for performance space for some other stuff. But we're going to have this computer assembly plant there. And we're going to also, because 3D printers are heating up, we're also going to probably do printer manufacture and assembly. I'm not sure how much exact manufacturing we'll do. We'll probably get parts done and then assemble everything here because I think that's probably the most cost-effective way. But that's the next big project that I've got. We're very lucky. We got some non-traditional funding. You know, we're looking at somewhere between $10 and $15 million to get that done. So that's actually that's the reason why I didn't get my hip replaced this spring, because I thought we were going into this project and I wanted to be able to be fully mobile. Because even as much tennis as I play and you know whatever, there's still rehab involved. Apparently, they're not going to let me come home after I get it done because I live alone. And they're going to go, well, you know, you're going to need help taking a shower and peeing and whatever. And I'm going, I don't really need that kind of help. But so that's what put. Yeah, well, that's what I think. I mean, of course, I know that's ego-driven. I mean, if you'd have seen me crying around here this weekend over, just playing tennis for the first time in a year, but that's an important project because we're going to do the full wraparound on that project. So we're going to have job training. We're going to have education. We're going to have, we're going to have mentoring for teens and young adults to the extent that we're going to help with. We even have we've got a youth program because one of the principals used to run one of the most successful basketball programs here on the South Side, and we're thinking about building just a raw gymnasium building for playing during the winter with some stands and stuff like that. But it's going to be a full wraparound for teenagers. We're going to do job training, education, make sure they've got reading and writing skills, better than Common Core, better than No Child Left Behind, better than just being able to make change at McDonald's. And we're going to, teach them how to be business people too. And if you walk in there, you will. I guarantee you will not see a pair of pants hanging off somebody's ass up in there, because if they do that, they're going to have to find someplace else to go. This is serious. We're expending some serious resources and going into serious debt in order to bring jobs to the South Side. And already, I'm not going to name names or anything, but there are people in other cities who are interested in looking at replicating this model. So hopefully we can be bringing jobs and training and good technical training to black teens in a number of different cities. That's my ultimate goal because, you got to compete. You got to compete for the better paying jobs. You got to compete for the for a number of things. I just saw here somebody here wants to get more information about our the initiative, and then someone wants to know about Earth Squadron. Earth Squadron is the first Black Science Fiction Society.com website movie. It's being produced in-house. The administrator, Jarvis Sheffield, has been building a studio, a mobile studio, to facilitate making our own movies. And I helped with writing the script, and I'm not exactly sure where we are. I don't meet with them regularly because he's down in Tennessee, and I'm up here in Chicago. But Earth Squadron is moving along pretty well. The crowdsourcing, the crowdfunding campaign brought in, I guess, about $3,000, so that worked well. Yeah, I'll be working on that too, but mostly from the perspective of, I think, of doing some rewrites and things like that as they come along. I'm very proud of this school on the west side of Chicago. For those of you who know Chicago, this is over where Sears had its huge catalog outlet center, which was acres and acres of buildings to support that. Well, now, where the original Sears Tower, which is like a 14-story little tower over on the west side of Chicago, we just, built a school called Holy Family School. This was about 6 years ago it opened. And the technology volunteers that we had put together, we did a lot of work. We did all the low voltage work. We did all the computers, all the wiring, all the cameras, all the phones, the intercoms, all of that stuff, all the technology volunteers did. So I still spend time every week over at that school keeping that going, and another school, another computer center in the Cabrini Green area that I built in 2001. So a lot of the things that I do are philanthropic in that respect because my belief is that if we don't invest in our kids learning these skills and being able to work on these kinds of technologies and to be facile with them, they're not going to be able to compete. And if they can't compete, then there's a self-perpetuating spiral downward in what happens in our neighborhoods and happens with our kids. So
now, we might have to apologize because for some bizarre reason my screen does not work for the chat room, so I can't see anything. If the last thing I see is a hobby asking you where were you. That is the last thing I have. It is not updated.
Oh, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to close that window and reopen it again.
Okay, because I'm not seeing nothing. There
Internet technologies being what they are.
I said, where is he finding this question?
Oh yeah, well, actually, because I have to do some of what Jarvis usually does. I have to. I've got actually two computers here in my office opened up on the chat here. Let's look at what guest said. The initiative, huge argument was about what developing subtitles. Yes. That's the other thing. Yes, we're actually putting in one of the things that we're doing is we're designing in a business incubator for that will be housed in the same facility as the 3D printer and computer assembly area, and we definitely want to help out in those people who want to be their own entrepreneurs, because that's essential too. There are not that many jobs out there for even technical jobs that are accessible to us. You've got major tech corporations really pumping up a lot of money into the House and Senate in Washington to increase the number of H-1B, is it H-1B? Yeah, H-1B visas to go and bring in technical help from other countries because then they don't have to pay them as much. So the thing that we're going to do is we're also going to try to help people, mentor people who want to start their own businesses. And we're going to teach them the fundamentals, things that they just don't do right, like how to pay your damn taxes every quarter. Keep up with your checkbook. I mean, you think that these things should be self-evident, but you don't get that training in high school, and if you don't, go to college or you go to a technical school, you don't necessarily get that. So yes, one of the things that we will be doing is we will be doing the business incubator mentoring to help people with develop their own enterprises and get their own businesses off the ground.
Well, I know that you had already picked up on the question regarding Earth Squadron and the phosphorus funding. So, I mean, I wonder what of your projects have you considered doing, that type of funding, or have you considered?
Oh man, as I sit here at the age I'm at, which fluctuates somewhere between maybe like 50 something to 184. Some of the things that I want to do, I really want to do these two movies. I have two movies in me. One is the bank heist movie. You can go see the trailer over on BSFS. It's over in my page. And the other one is an urban adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Ghost of Christmas Past, Christmas Present, Christmas Future. And I want to do an urban adaptation of that where you got two factions at this car wash. It's an outdoor car wash, and it's an outdoor car wash that operates in Chicago in the winter. Because I can't think of a more miserable job than that, especially after the winter we just had, and to have the byplay, the conversational byplay, because I really do like writing conversation, dialogue. The dialogue between the black folks and the Latinos, I think is going to be a lot of fun to write because I got a bunch of friends who are going to help me out with that. But as far as really big projects, I think if I can get this model where we're helping people from my communities or people from urban communities get jobs and build their livelihoods in technology, I think that's enough. I mean, I don't know how many more good years I have in me to do stuff like this, but that seems like enough. I mean, and there aren't that many other people doing it. You look at a lot of wealthy black folks out there, and I just don't know how many of them are really mentoring people in things other than hip hop or a basketball program or something like that. And it could just be a failure on my part of not seeing them, not finding them, not knowing where to look. But at least here in Chicago, if I can make a big enough dent in some of that here in Chicago, and we can get some real businesses built on the south side and the west side, that's pretty cool. I got a school going on the west side that, I'm very proud of my participation in the school. I'm going to go work there tomorrow, and that makes me feel real good about myself. So the creative stuff, getting people to read what I write and to dig on those stories and things like that, that's almost secondary because it's not something that it doesn't feed my soul like philanthropy or community outreach, and it certainly doesn't feed my pocket because I do it all for no money. but
I have a question.
those. Yeah, go ahead.
Then,
I'm sorry.
I've heard you, tout your, I guess your background in philanthropy and technology, your background, of course, in information technology, and these are things that you're sharing with and hoping, to provide as a basis for the community to move forward, young people to move forward. But I haven't heard you talk about anything with respect to your creative endeavors, passing on your writing fundamentals, passing on your screenwriting formats, or how it is that you envision those things. Are those things ultimately issues that you don't find as viable to be teaching to our young people, or is it just that you've never thought about it?
I haven't thought about it yet, and I think part of the reason for that, I know the reason for that. Right now, the mentoring I'm doing is in an elementary school, so it's just this summer that I'm going to be teaching one of the teachers and providing her with the hardware so that she can start doing editing videos and things like that. So maybe I might get to that point. But I think part of that I'm holding back on, because I think it's going to happen this way. If the Dark Side trilogy gets picked up and used in schools, then there will be travel, there will be mentoring, there will be lectures about the creative process, and not just the creative process of the physicality of writing, getting the words down on paper, but the creative process about, maybe how what process I go through to create, the actual process of creation. So as far as outreach in that respect, I don't, nobody's asked me yet, because there aren't that many people who know I'm a writer. Maybe just a few thousand at the most. And there's a certain threshold that I think has to be met in order for someone to consider me as a mentor in that area. It hasn't happened yet. I haven't been asked yet. And I'm hoping, I guess my ego would love to believe that it's just because you haven't been discovered, rather than, nobody likes what you write. But the principal of the school, this elementary school, she's read Discovery, and I think she's starting to read Conception now. She's, because the themes are a little more adult than you would have in an elementary school, she hasn't mentioned it. Other people haven't mentioned it yet. But I do know that once schools start using your book, colleges, universities, and things like that, things will open up. And Natasha Womack wrote some very, very flattering things about Discovery and the Dark Side trilogy in her book on Afrofuturism. And when I've talked to other creatives, I have made no secret of the fact that I think that the idea, the meme of Afrofuturism is one that's on the verge of busting out. And I think some of that spillover will benefit me, because I am mentioned in that vein, and again, for which I'm grateful. So I think community outreach or mentoring in terms of creativity it's not off the table at all. Other than the fact that, with the young kids, they have germs, and I don't like germs. No, I'm serious. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't like germs. I don't like getting sick and stuff like that. I'm not a septophobe or anything, but to actually go, let's say I help do a creative writing class for 7th and 8th graders, that would be perfectly fine with me. I would love to do that. I do have teaching credentials, so it's something that I could do. But until you asked it, I honestly hadn't given it that much thought, because I didn't think of myself as that kind of resource. I see myself as a good technical resource or or helping build this or do that. But I didn't think of that until you brought it up. So maybe I should look out for more opportunities like that.
Yeah, it'd be good. It'd be a good idea. Now, we have someone who has asked, so they were talking about mentoring programs, and I guess you've already seen that, the program at pixelcore.com. And someone indicating they're mentoring offshore like Africa. I don't know who guest 8 is. You can, let us know who you are. That would be good. And
yeah, I'm actually gonna look that up right now. Put that in another panel here. I have a lot of interests, and I like doing a lot of things. I would like to travel a little more, which I think may happen if I do more stuff in terms of schools and things like that. That'll be kind of cool. But one of the things that I will tell you right now, I'll be honest with you, on the back of my books it says, oh, no, William's going to stay in Chicago, and, the city that he loves, and keep writing. Well, if Chicago keeps having these damn winters like we had this last winter, that's, as my sister used to say when she was about 4 years old, that's dead and stanky. I don't want to have to go through too many more of those really vicious winters. So I'll be honest with you, I've been looking at St. Croix and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I torture myself. On my weather.com page, whenever I pull it up, it shows the weather for both Chicago and St. Croix, so that I know what I'm missing.
So, yeah, you just tell Chicago, look, if you want me to stay here, you got to get your weather together. This bad weather's a deal breaker.
Oh man, it was this last winter was bad. My car needed a replacement part, and I didn't have my car for a few weeks there, and I was taking public transportation and having to walk out in that cold. And I'm telling you, I'm like Danny Glover, and we all know what he says, right? When he's getting too old for this, there you go. That's me. Someone mentioned here that kids. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just said we're getting down to the last 3 minutes or so of the show. So in the last 3 minutes or so of the show, I always like to end with telling us where you are, where we find you, where you're gonna be, so people want to meet you, where they know to come to show up. Like C2E2, okay, nobody, you didn't show up at that, but where else can people expect to see you, online or in person, in the next several months?
Well, as I'm editing, I'm almost always have the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website up, and I generally listen to see if anybody's doing chat. So for people who want to catch hold of me there, that's fine, and you can message me there, and I always answer my messages, my email. The other thing is, I don't have a problem with actually talking to somebody on the phone. A lot of people are very, kind of suspicious. AT&T turned the entire country into a bunch of passive aggressives with caller ID, because I don't know a black person in existence, in my existence, who will answer the phone without knowing who's on it first. Oh, yeah, I know people are going to dog me about that, but you know what? Find me one who will. So I don't mind talking to people on the phone, so they can catch me there. I'm not going to give out my number unless I know who it is, because I don't need I don't want to, win the lottery or, get some scam or anything. But I'm there, and as for book signings or anything like that, I think that I won't be doing too much of that during the summer, because with Confrontation coming out, I really think I'll have it out in September. So from September to the end of the year, which is the prime retail season, I will probably be out and about, and I'll be sticking my schedule up on the calendar at BSFS. So if anybody's interested in me. And for those people who travel to Chicago infrequently, who may be coming here during the summer, if you drop me a note on BSFS, I like to meet the people who are, the creatives there. and taking somebody to lunch. And don't call me just because you want a free lunch. But going to lunch with somebody, I think that's pretty cool to meet these creatives. I mean, I've met so many. I just realized we got about 1 minute. I realized that we have a year's worth of shows that I've done. That's a lot of people that I've met, and to be able to start to meet them face to face, a good number of them face to face, I would enjoy that a lot. So I'm accessible. I'm not cosmetically underprivileged, so you don't have to squint when you're sitting across from me eating. And I think a lot of all of the creative people who I've met on that particular website.
Cool. All right. Well, like you said, we are right at it. The top of the hour, and again, we're here at the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Series 2.0, and this is the May 9th, 2014 edition. And we are here with William Hayashi, author, screenwriter, IT genius guy. And we've just had a really lovely conversation. And those of you all who, again, want to meet with, talk with, discuss things with William, you can catch him. Again, it's at BSFS. He will not, again, give out his phone number, but and can check with him at BSFS, and I'm sure that he will answer your question, touch base with you regarding everything from mentorship, to writership. I don't know, but this has been, again, an interesting conversation, a very good in-depth conversation. Next week you'll be back on the other side of the desk, and putting other people in the hot seat. But as it stands, I've enjoyed it.
Well, look, I mean, I don't normally sit on this side, and I want to thank you for doing this and for making it very easy for me, because it's not the same being interviewed as it is being the interviewer. So Penelope, thank you very much for your help, and thank all of you for listening, both live and in the podcast. And drop me a note. And
I see. Very funny.
Yeah. Well, when I'm on your side of the desk, I tell everybody the reason why I can do this every Friday is because I do have that ankle bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank everybody for dropping in, and I want to thank Jarvis for letting us have this go on, even as he's in class tonight. And he would say that he wants to thank everybody for listening, for supporting the site, for tuning in, and to keep supporting it. Tell your friends, tell your family, get people to get involved, and to thank everybody for their participation. Don't forget, Earth Squadron is in process, which is the first feature film for the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. And keep on doing what you guys do to participate, because I think it's a fun community to belong to.
Well, with us being, again, at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock, again, we thank everybody for listening in, and for BSFS. Good night.
All right. Hang on for a second. 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 All right. Hang on.